Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Condo Insider. White Counsel of Community Associations, we've been doing this now for 7 years, I think longer than 7 years. But we originally started with Think Tech Hawaii, but Think Tech Hawaii retired, I believe last year. So we had to create our own YouTube channel, and we got that going. And thank goodness that we found Key Media, who is our media person, to do our recordings. So today I have with me Jasmine Hall with Birding Wild, and also Bill McKeon, who is out of their Maui office and has been with us before doing Condo Insiders. He has educated our audience. He's also participated in our in-person seminars on plumbing issues, especially in today's world. A lot of condo buildings are redoing their plumbing pipes. And it was a good learning experience for us to learn about the do's and don'ts about plumbing replacements, and the horror stories, and also about contracts, little innuendos in contracts. But today we're going to talk about a growing topic about the use of AI, whether it be GPT chat or Copilot, whichever versions you want to use. And a lot of people are relying too much on AI to do responses. Especially the other day, I heard a board member saying that, oh, they needed to write a letter to respond to an owner. And she was telling the property manager that, and the property manager says, no, we need to write it via AI. And I'm like, what? So that kind of got me clued in to contact with Birding Wild, because I knew they were doing a seminar in California on the same subject. So I honed them in to do a Condo Insider for us to kind of cover that topic. So with that said, so we have Jasmine Hall out of their California office, at their AI expert attorney, and then Bill McKeon out of the Maui office. So I'll let you guys take it from there.
Thanks so much for having us, Raylene. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk with your audience. All right. So first, I think the most important thing is that we are using a shared language. And, interestingly enough, in terms of what is AI, artificial intelligence, there is not a shared definition. There's not like one specific, oh, AI means X. The way that there is, if we say, look, there's a chair, there's a couch, like we understand what that is. There may be different types, but we're using a same language. And so with, definitionally, if you go to Google, it's going to have one definition. If you ask the science folks from NASA, they'll have a different definition. You go to ChatGPT, it's going to have its own understanding of what is AI. And so why it matters in terms of having a one accepted definition is that it's important when we're referring to things, that we are referring to the same thing. And when you don't have consensus on what is artificial intelligence, then you're going to run into potential issues from policy and implementation standpoints, regulation standpoints. And so the favorite one of all the different definitions that I, came across was from the National Institute of Biomedical Engineering and Imaging. And it's, sort of succinctly define AI as the ability of machines to learn through experience and gain proficiencies through examples, not just by carrying out computations instructed by human users. And so you say, all right, well, with that, understanding of artificial intelligence, there's going to be different levels and sort of skill things. So we'll, now go on to the ethics of AI. And, in terms of like the ethics of AI, there's funny examples and then there's really serious examples. And, on the funnier end of things, literally like a month ago, Kim Kardashian went on to one of her, like inside Hollywood type of shows. And, she's been in the process of endeavoring to become a lawyer in the state of California. And, she disclosed on, this, program that she didn't pass the bar because she had used ChatGPT to help her study for it.
Oh my God.
A stunning disclosure for sure. I mean, kind of comical because I'm pretty sure even if AI had been, around when Bill and I had taken the bar exam, it's probably not the place that I would have gone to study for the bar. I don't know about you, Bill. What do you think?
But didn't even exist back then, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Didn't have even the temptation.
Exactly. And so, like that's kind of a funny disclosure. I mean, the ethics of it is that instead of being accountable personally for not studying hard enough or diligently enough, she put the blame on her failure in, passing the bar exam on the AI product. And, there's certainly ethical implications with that, where I see a lot of future boards, homeowners, you name the different stakeholders in running common interest communities. And instead of being like, oh, that was our fair housing failure because we, wrote an inappropriate communication responding to a person who requested a reasonable accommodation. And they're like, oh, well, ChatGPT wrote it. So it wasn't really us. And, I think on a serious end, boards do need to be very careful and mindful that using AI doesn't remove your risk and liability. And, the boards of directors are still going to be held accountable for the communications that they authorize sending out. And so it certainly behooves one to, make sure a human is at the end of the AI process for associations and reviewing communications and the like, and on the other end of the scale from, funny, haha, Kim Kardashian not passing the bar, AI can have really serious real world impacts on people and, their uses. There's documented instances around the globe of, people engaging with AI chatbots that, lead them to take their own lives or take the lives of another person. And, that's about the worst ethical issue that you could run into in terms of, AI and how it interacts with its users and, the sort of warping effect that, artificial intelligence can create for some people. And those are probably on the regulatory end. We'll see that from legislators, hopefully down the line. But, why it's important is that I think we've all seen homeowners, residents, board members, different stakeholders, and when you're being ChatGPT'd. You just know it. Like the font is a specific way. There's sort of a formatting, and so hopefully we can give the boards of directors and managers in the industries helpful tools. So in terms of the legal issues related to using AI, Bill and I on the attorney side, we have state bar regulations that provide pretty strict guidance for us on how we're, able to use AI. If we're able to use AI, we certainly have confidentiality requirements with our clients. So like California Bar has provided guidance. It says we can't upload confidential information to an open source system like ChatGPT. We would have to strip out all of the confidential information. Bill in Hawaii, has the bar provided guidance for practitioners yet?
Well, yes and no. In the federal courts here in Hawaii, in November of 2023, the federal courts passed a general order here requiring that attorneys or persons representing themselves that used AI to prepare a brief that's being filed with the court to disclose that fact to the court and to represent in a declaration, a sworn statement to the court that they have basically checked all of the citations and that they're real. They're not fake citations. The state bar, on the other hand, has conducted a study and it's supposed to be coming out in December. That was earlier this year. Supreme Court said they were going to study the issue and they were supposed to come out with something in about a month, and we'll see what they do. But there certainly have been reported cases here in Hawaii that have made the news of attorneys and persons, citing to fake cases in support of their arguments, and it's been front page news over here on a couple of occasions. So it's definitely going on, and it's been going on.
Yeah, no, same here on the mainland and California. I mean, these cases are so new, and to give, context, like it takes years, whether you're, in Hawaii or the mainland, to go through a case through like the trial level through the appeals court. And California had its first published appellate decision just in September. So, I mean, that's how like new these, cases and issues are, where the plaintiff's attorney, it was an unremarkable like employment law case, and the court elected to publish its decision because the plaintiff's attorney's appellate brief, of the 23 legal authorities cited in the brief, 21 were fabricated. I mean, that's just a stunning, like, oh my gosh, where he had all the reasons like, oh, I put it through, this program and that program, and I didn't know that they would hallucinate. And, but the outcome of the case was the court literally went through every instance of the AI and its failures, and whether it was entirely fabricated cases, real cases that had fabricated, quotes, misstatements of real cases and their holdings and what the quotes meant, and all of those, at least in Hawaii for your current federal rules, those would all be absolute violations of your ethical responsibility. And so it's just something that like people should understand. The open source AI programs, they are programmed to provide an answer. It doesn't mean that it's providing you with a correct answer. It's like that's its objective, and that's why it hallucinates things. And in closed systems, certainly for the attorneys of the world, we may use Westlaw or LexisNexis as our primary like search engines. Those are closed systems that they're sort of created in their AI constructs to not hallucinate cases. So there's a little bit better assurance there, but even still, we have the like requirement to cite those cases, review them like as a human being instead of relying on artificial intelligence. And why this matters, what attorneys have to go through as it relates to boards of directors and managers in common interest communities, is that these same obligations, us having a human being, confirming that our citations are real and that they're accurately stated, those same types of obligations are going to apply to boards of directors. They're not required to be the lawyer. So that's on us if they're asking us for guidance. But the board of directors, they have their own duty of care, their fiduciary responsibility when they're making decisions on behalf of their corporate organizations to act reasonably and in good faith. And that reasonable and in good faith, it's not going to cover, I reviewed this, $2 million re-roofing contract through ChatGPT and asked it to tell me, name all the liabilities and risks, because ChatGPT is not qualified to practice law. And it's certainly something that, I mean, Bill, all of our clients are nonprofit corporations. Like, I understand the last people that they want to pay money to are you and me for legal services. I get it. I don't begrudge that. But I think what's important is that boards need to be very mindful about fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility, because I know the easiest thing in the world would be, oh, we're going to save $3,000 by not having legal counsel review this contract. And then we've done good for our community because we saved money. And you're like, no, you didn't do good for your community that you saved money, but you exposed it to greater risk, and you exposed yourselves to greater risk and liability through breach of duty claims. They may or may not be covered under your insurance. Raylene and I were talking before we jumped on just about the changing landscape of D&O, director and officer liability policies. These are things that are starting to become written into policies. And, I always tease people, if it's on the front page of your insurance policy, it's covered, and everything that's on like the 200 pages after it, that's not covered. Those are the exclusions to what's going to be covered. And, I can absolutely foresee D&O policies in the future as AI becomes more prevalent in our, society generally, to start writing types of things where, hey, we're not covering a breach of duty claim that's based on a board's, use of AI, because that wasn't a reasonable, exercise of their diligence and duty of care from the outset. And so, I think that AI has a absolutely important place. It's certainly going to be this kind of future of a lot of different things, but it is not going to remove the board's continued duty of care. That's like been the standard of board members and what a fiduciary responsibility is for like hundreds of years in terms of like defining what that means. And I really want to make sure that your board members and managers are equipped to like press back on the narrative from homeowners. You guys are spending, profligate spenders, misuse of association money, overspending. I mean, these are things that we hear routinely. And you want to make sure that boards are able to respond to you shouldn't have used an attorney for this contract. You should have just put it through ChatGPT, so that they can respond and say, we're fulfilling our duty. Like, we may have consulted with that, but it doesn't mean that that's the only resource we consulted in helping inform our decisions. And so, that's just something to be super mindful about. I think it's helpful to sort of present for your, audience, especially managers, different like artificial intelligence systems that they may not be aware of. It's certainly something that I recommend, whether you're executives of companies or, managers, obviously make sure that they are compliant with your like employee practices and your handbook. You don't want to start using AI and then you see in your company's handbook like, oh, it's not permitted. Don't engage in job violations. But some of these are helpful to know that they're out there, to evaluate whether they could be helpful for your management company. They can provide efficiencies. We've got everything from ChatGPT. It can draft things. I think one of the important things to consider with ChatGPT is that, the more you use that program to draft your communications, it does have a corresponding negative effect in terms of like your, cognitive interaction. And so sort of best practice, if you're going to be using ChatGPT or generative AI products to help you draft things, is to start the draft yourself. And if you get into writer's block and you're like, oh, I'm drafting a community newsletter, I'm drawing a blank, start what you can and then ask AI ChatGPT to assist you in completing the desired outcome. That's a better cognitive outcome for you as a person. So just something to keep in mind. There's definitely studies that have been conducted that are, starting to evaluate the effects of using artificial intelligence solutions. So, we've got ChatGPT. We've got a company called Stan. It was kind of extraordinary. Like when I went and looked at it, I mean, it's like it can cover 130, different languages, which is amazing. It can do everything from drafting budgets and preparing reserve studies and minutes and, communications to homeowners. And you're like, well, heck, do we even need managers if we've got an AI that can do it all? And, there is a, new service, at least it's starting in California. I don't know if they've expanded it to different jurisdictions where, it's kind of the concept of it is basically an entirely AI-based management experience and management company. And yeah, I was like, oh heavens, I think on one hand, like I love the ingenuity that's going into these types of programs and offerings. And on the other hand, I don't know about you, Bill, but there is such a human degree of this industry. And at the end of the day, until AI replaces us as humans and is the one that lives in the separate interest condos and houses, I'm like, we're still going to have humans at the heart of, the homeowners association experience. And,
Yeah, I
so
agree 100%. And as somebody once told me several years ago, if you're at the cutting edge of technology, expect to get cut. Um, so if you're the first guinea pig on the block, be wary of what you're getting into. None of this is really completely tried and true and tested yet.
yeah, exactly. And so, in addition, we've got, like tools like Zendesk. It's, endeavoring to help walk people through how to use different technology platforms. Hey, that's awesome. We've got Power BI, which is kind of like a executive focused AI tool that's endeavoring to help organizations know how much it provides a lot of data, but it's basically like how much are their employees engaging with the different types of platforms, so hey, how many hours a day are our employees using Microsoft Teams versus Microsoft Word? And that's like a sort of very basic example, but it's trying to provide executives with information on, are these tools effective? Do we need to scale down or scale up the types of tools and services that we have? Even next door, sometimes that gets to be the butt of jokes in HOA world, because we're like, oh, that's maybe where the like cesspool of humanity goes to engage with each other in their neighborhood. And it, often turns acrimonious and nasty more than it turns, polite and pleasant. And you've got like Nextdoor is very aware of this negative, perception in the industry about its service. And since 2023, it's like 3 years ago, almost, that they partnered with OpenAI, the AI company, to have ChatGPT like preemptively write nicer posts. And they've had like a kindness, like, hey, little kindness stop before things get posted. And I mean, I think that's kind of like, on one hand, it's comical that they had to do that. And on the other hand, you're like, wow. So even on like little tiny granular types of services, where it could be, the next door social media, website for neighbors, that you've got, you know, generative AI as part of that experience now. I think it's just absolutely fascinating, and you go all the way down to like Westlaw, Raylene, you were talking about using Counsel, which is a, Thomson Reuters product. And, they have just a robust suite of different artificial intelligence offerings. And, in theory, these different services provide, potentially almost limitless capabilities and opportunities for their users. And, as a person who's like gone through a lot of them, it's just still not taken the human being out of this process. And I don't think that it ever really will be able to. And so I encourage people to like look at these different, platforms, see if they can be helpful, and then find a way to integrate them into your, whether it's your business, your workflow, but not at the expense of like your human connection to your work and to your clients and your communities. And so,
I never realized I saw your Nextdoor on here, and I'm on Nextdoor, but I don't religiously go through it every day or every week, but I can see the potential for it if a condo community created their own Nextdoor group, the potential or the propensity for it to get out of control.
Yeah.
With the comments. And I mean, I use it to look for recommendations, or look at what people recommend. I look at for reviews for like a handyman or electrician, for small kind of jobs and stuff. And I use it to look for the reviews, people comments back, whether good, bad, ugly, and that kind of stuff. But I can see where it could get out of control.
Yeah, well, it goes off the rails.
Yeah, I was like, wow, yeah, that's right. It can get really way out there.
For sure. So, one of the things that I know, like, especially managers have talked to me about is like the struggle with responding when you have different people, like basically ChatGPTing you, if ChatGPT is a verb. And, I've found even personally in my own practice that when a board member or a homeowner sends what's clearly artificially intelligence generated communication, it takes a lot more time, not less time, to respond to it. And that certainly increases costs, and no one wants that. And so, managers were like, I mean, just you hear it, like exasperation when they're like, oh my God, like it's crushing my workload because I'm getting this, one fly in the ointment homeowner or resident who's, peppering me with like daily chat GPTs, and it's taking hours to try and respond. And so they were like, what can I do? And I was like, I got this. I know how to help you. And I was like, this is something lawyers do all the time. So let me share the like tip with lawyers. Don't get sucked into the time suck. I was like, just because a opposing counsel or ChatGPT sends you a 10-page letter with 30 different, A, B, C, D, all the way through the alphabet of grievances or issues or wrongdoing and this, that, and the other thing, it doesn't mean you have to address each and every one of them. How many times, Bill, have you sent a letter that's like, we categorically deny and wholeheartedly reject these allegations of wrongdoing? I'm going to respond to letter E of your alphabet soup. And like, that's the one that we respond to. And I said, like managers in particular have such a heart of service, and they're really oriented to try and like problem solve, respond with good service. And that's just a, like wonderful and unique thing about this industry that we're in. But I was like, you don't have to answer all of the issues. And, sometimes it's helpful to hear that from an attorney who's like, hey, when I get these crazy letters, I don't necessarily respond to all of them. I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to do so, but it does not have to be your automatic assumption that you must respond to everything that's outlined. And the easy way to, avoid having to do that is saying like, we don't agree with everything that's, being alleged, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's helpful for managers to know that, we can simply just not go down the rabbit hole with ChatGPT, and, be clear that that's what we're doing. If a homeowner or resident has, engaged in the process outside the community or management's like standard operating process, if we have a call center where you're supposed to like call and place a complaint or a work order ticket, and instead you went straight to the manager, it's okay to redirect them and be like, thanks so much for your communication. We don't agree with all of these things. I'm going to redirect you to the customer care team so that you can report your issue. Thank you so much. And that's absolutely an okay way to respond. And it will help save time and, aggravation. It can be a little different when a board member sends you a ChatGPT. I've gone through it personally. Bill, have you ever had a board member like send you a ChatGPT critique of your work product?
Everybody's an expert these days, right? Because they take it and they run it through, ChatGPT, as you said, and they come back with a response. And like you said, it's pretty easy to spot when they do that. You can also run somebody's comment or email or letter to you through ChatGPT, for example, and say, what is the probability that this was drafted using ChatGPT? So even if you don't see the hyphens, the semicolons, the kind of giveaways that it was ChatGPT, you can also figure that out. But yeah, we're all getting that. Everybody's an expert. And that's what scares me is we've been hearing for years, board members say, well, I don't want to use an architect or an engineer to help with the repair project because it's going to cost money. And here's my idea. And now they're starting to do that with legal issues.
Yeah. And, it's just, I will keep reiterating it until they change the laws regarding what breach of duty is and is not. But I mean, at the heart of it, like, boards still need to be absolutely like clear-eyed about the duty of care and our duty to do reasonable investigation. And just because we use this trillion-dollar technology does not mean that it's still going to satisfy us. So just be careful about that one. So in terms of best practices and using artificial intelligence, I recommend people like pick one or two. It's why I kind of went through a sort of list at the beginning of like, hey, here's different AI, services and solutions, and try to find out how to become proficient at it, because they're not always intuitive. ChatGPT is actually wildly easy to use. Just type in your query. But if you're looking for assistance in, on a company-wide level of trying to integrate AI, maybe a sort of a service person like a chat bot for, helping reduce the length of time that a resident has from when I reported my, issue, clogged drain, leaves on my patio from a tree that shouldn't be there, you name it, is like become proficient in it. And it does not necessarily happen overnight. So instead of trying to like be the, jack of all trades and the master of none, become the master of an AI program. And, like understand that it's better used to enhance you as opposed to replace you. And so starting communications on your own, and then, introducing it down the line to help get you across the hurdle, maybe, save time, etc. That's a better best practice than just using AI as the starting point of your work product. You know, like automating routine tasks. Like, I think that's fantastic. If you're able to have an AI program that responds to all the emails you weren't able to get to by the end of the day, and send a quick little auto response that's like, hey, your email's important to me. I've been, taken away by other important matters today. I'm aiming to provide you a response tomorrow. Like, who here would have I want that program? You know what I mean? Like, that would be fantastic to have that type of a service. And so, I do see AI as having a very important pivotal role, but it's thinking through it strategically and thoughtfully on how it could best help you become more efficient and responsive. I mean, that's probably the number one issue that I hear when boards of directors, they may come to me and say, we're not happy with our current management. They don't respond on time, or our homeowners think management doesn't respond on time. Like, if you had a program that could help improve responsiveness, that'd be fantastic. And I recommend that companies and managers really take care to look into what those could be. There's other types of AI services and products out there, like it's sort of a newer startup company, but I was like super excited when I read about it in an article in the Wall Street Journal earlier this year. It's artificial intelligence wildfire predictive cameras. And you put these cameras, they're very expensive, but you put them in these remote areas where there's, sometimes prone to, wildfires. And certainly, for Maui in particular, this could have been a game-changing type of product if it had been implemented. And, these cameras, they've got predictive AI that is trained on what wildfire looks like, the waft of smoke, et cetera, et cetera. And they don't go to sleep. They don't have bad days. These cameras are just there, 360-degree views, and ready to report to, local fire department when any of the, instances that are tagged as wildfire evidence. And, for my clients that are in high wildfire areas, this is definitely something that I recommend at least be considered. Some communities, it may be outside their budget, but at least it's, the more of these types of services that are out there that'll help bring down the costs. Security cameras is another example. Flock cameras is basically a, AI-driven system that helps read licenses, reports potential crime to, local law enforcement. I think that can be a very helpful thing for communities to have in their arsenal of tools. So hopefully that's something helpful for boards and for managers to just be aware of, like, hey, it's fantastic. We've got some best practices, we've got some potentially helpful tools. And then we go to the like Debbie Downer side of using AI and the drawbacks. And, on the legal end of things, on the one hand, yeah, it's really great at summarizing deposition transcripts, because I'm, corporate counsel. A lot of people call us the general counsel. 0% of my work is based on summarizing deposition transcripts. So in the like the doing of this industry, the drafting of correspondence to homeowners and residents, the interacting with opposing counsel when there is a, enforcement dispute. I mean, I've been on my own law firm's artificial intelligence committee. We've been, diligently investigating different offerings, over the last 10 months. And I can tell you, having reviewed lots of different services, that there's just not a AI service that is, really helpful in the type of complex work, even though it may seem simple that I sent a homeowner a response letter or a cease and desist letter. AI is not, an effective tool in those types of undertakings. So from the type of legal work that's not on the litigation end, the general counsel side, I'm still hoping, and I'm still going to keep my fingers crossed that there's like a really excellent tool out there, and I'm going to hope that the existing tools continue to improve. So in terms of training newer staff, simply because of the different like empiric studies that have already been done and that will continue to occur, training new staff, basically saying do your job through AI, you're doing a disservice to the new staff member, because you want them to learn the industry. You want them to know this stuff, not to rely on a, generative AI program to do their jobs for them. And so, I really encourage companies that use artificial intelligence in any of their, services or sort of workflow practices to not shortchange new hires and, new entrants to this industry by just saying, do your job through generative AI, because they're not ultimately going to be learning the things of the industry that we need and want them to learn. And so, I mean, you've got younger people who are growing up in an era where ChatGPTs existed since they were, able to hold a phone. And it's like, Bill and I, that didn't exist. I think I'm the first in California. My graduating law school class was the first class that was even allowed to use a computer to write your bar exam. That was 2002. Every class before then, you had to handwrite it like with a pen. And so, we've certainly, like, now we're at a place where artificial intelligence is going to be there for all the new graduating lawyers since they were kids. And so, we want them to come into this industry, whether you're on the law side or in the management side, and have the independent critical thinking that's necessary, because this stuff is hard. Like, being in a community association management law service provider is wildly complicated. Like, I absolutely love this industry because it is so complex and ever changing. And, you can have same fact pattern, but different outcome, just because humans, are so wildly unpredictable. So I hope that companies will really be mindful about who they are having use their AI programs and systems, and that they, take care to set their, especially younger team members up for long-term success, because they know this stuff as opposed to are able to like regurgitate it back. So that's just not helpful. And then, yep.
I would just add that, picking up on that, it's critical that everyone really study AI very, very deeply. I know Jasmine and I are, we take seminars on it, we read about it, we talk to others that are in the fields, but it's here to stay. But you have to understand both, the good it can do and the drawbacks, because there are some huge holes you can fall into if you don't know how to use it and you're not using it carefully and ethically. But yeah, you've got to learn, your staff has to learn, you have to train on it. When I started, it was typewriters to personal computers. And that was a huge learning curve. And this is an even bigger learning curve because it's just so complex. But it's been going on for several years. So if you haven't been studying, you're sort of behind the eight ball, and you need to, study up and get your staff studied up to catch up, frankly, at this point.
Sure, absolutely.
I,
And
I've started to notice when you go, like when you Google something, AI is pretty much in there, but there's a small little disclaimer at the bottom. I've started to notice to see that something to the effect you still have to verify the information. I never saw it before, but I started noticing it. But again, people can't rely 100% on that as they're next to their use of their phone. I mean, they can't, it still requires your thinking brain.
it sure does. And I mean, whether that's like, other important considerations are like, making sure that you've reviewed your company's contract if you're a management company, and if it has any kind of confidentiality, protections for your customers' information. But if you or your team are using AI like ChatGPT and you're just putting communications up there, that might be violating your own management contract. And so it's just something to be really conscientious about, that the way that you or your team are using AI, it's not in violation of whether it's like employee handbook type of policies or, any type of customer service agreement that may be in place. And for the executives of management companies to go and review and have the management company's counsel review their existing agreements and maybe make modifications for future clients, and to have discussions with existing clients to be like, hey, we either need to amend the agreement to address this use of artificial intelligence systems, so that we're not violating the agreement either, inadvertently or advertently. So
there was a contract that was presented when I was on the board. There was a contract that was presented to us by the property manager. It was for a project manager for a spalling repair. And sometimes I just glance through it, but this one, for some reason, I actually sat and read the front and the back. And I was highlighting certain things that I didn't like. And at the meeting, I really pushed for it to be reviewed by legal counsel as standard practice, right? But I hit some walls, and finally the property manager goes, well, yeah, okay, maybe we should have it reviewed. It came back with a big long list of stuff that the attorney didn't like. And now we're in this conversation. I'm thinking, okay, if the board said, well, why don't we put it into AI? I'm like, okay, is AI going to identify that one of the sentences as our labor rates are attached? Because it was never attached to the actual paper document. So are they going to, recognize that? And number two, one of the biggest things was I happened to notice their website on the contract. So I thought, oh, let's see what's on their website. Now we're doing concrete work, right? The website was all related to solar and electrical. Our team members were former HECO linemen, electrical engineers. And so I'm like, well, and I presented it to the board. I told them, I said, if you're willing to sign this contract, you guys are crazy. Absolutely crazy. And I go, did you guys even look at their website? It became pretty contentious, but ultimately they didn't move forward with it. But I told them, I said, you guys are crazy. You're asking for a huge problem if you sign this contract. But AI would probably not even pick up the website,
No. And that's such a good thing to bring up, Raylene, because there's lots of things that like the way this whole presentation came up was I did a presentation sort of like this, except it was on rule enforcement, like the most banal of subjects, sort of. And, it was recorded on a Zoom, and then the Zoom did a, like transcript of the whole thing. And this was like a 90-minute presentation on rule enforcement, just vanilla stuff, nothing, remarkably interesting other than I, was very clear like how to do rule enforcement. And, right before the presentation started, because I was on a panel, and one of the panelists made a kind of funny little joke that had a political sort of tinge to it. And, because this was being recorded, that thought that AI had like colored all of the way that it generated the transcript and how it understood and interpreted this presentation. It thought it was about like political enforcement issues. And you're like, nothing to do with that. It's like HOA, like, is your trash can out too long? Is your grass not mowed fast enough? And, you and me and Bill would have obviously understood like that was just like a 20-second comment that was like completely unrelated, and AI didn't have the ability to distinguish between this like little off the color remark and the substance of the presentation. So I mean, I definitely agree with you, Raylene. Like you need to be very careful with like how you use AI and also how you rely on AI. Things like minutes, it can not understand some of the human interpersonal things that it may hear are occurring on a Zoom, and a human would know, oh, like that wasn't really relevant, and it's just going to build all of it in. If you're not taking your own minutes and you're just going to go and rely on the generative minutes, are they going to be accurate? And so I definitely encourage people to, continue to rely on your own internal skills and use AI to help and enhance you, not replace you. So yeah. But in terms of like takeaways for your, listeners and for your audience, I think it's important that we know like artificial intelligence is not going to replace people. It can enhance us. And so, the people who are at the forefront of learning how it's able to enhance us and make us efficient, they'll certainly have a leg up in terms of, the industry that may not be there yet. So that's why I encourage, like, do look into AI systems and services and find how it can be of benefit, but not replace. Start company, whether you're the employee or a board or, executive, start having these discussions with the different stakeholders and finding out their different tolerances. You may have some, younger boards of directors that are very comfortable, and you may have some older boards of directors that are like, hey, if it wasn't, if it wasn't written by a human being, like, don't put it in front of me. And that's okay. And, like you won't know those tolerances and comfort levels unless you have discussions. And, you want to make sure that on the employer's side, that you have clear policies for your staff and for your team to be able to follow. If generative AI is not permitted, okay, then that needs to be something that's clearly understood by your staff. For the lawyers like Bill and I, if we have state bar guidelines that direct like what we can and can't do and how we have to interact and inform with our uses of artificial intelligence, like then we need to have that built into our handbook so that all of our people know, like, hey, you can't use ChatGPT and put like a client letter in there. And then certainly going and reviewing your vendor and service agreements, whether it's I'm the management company and I have this for my HOA clients, or I'm a landscaping company and I'm, using artificial intelligence irrigation control systems. We should make sure that we've disclosed and that we are, appropriately assigning and addressing risk exposure to the different types of services. And, in terms of like communications policies, I know that it's super easy for boards of directors to be, we're just going to cut out a lot of costs by using AI to generate our communications. And I, think that associations need to be really careful and not like take the human out of the loop. And there should always be a, clear, there is a person who's the last, line of defense before something just gets published. Like, could you imagine if you had a community newsletter that you're like, I had AI draft it, I didn't bother to read it, and in the newsletter it says the president of the board, killed someone's cat, and it's like not true. It's like, well, AI just like it sometimes just hallucinates stuff, so it's
Right. Well, yeah.
possible it could do that. So you want to make sure that if you're a board of directors and you're using AI, that you have guidelines on how you're using AI to make sure that you avoid these types of liabilities. And you want to make sure that, on the litigation side of things, Bill, what's your reaction when you jump on a Zoom with a board and you see like it's got so-and-so's, Zoom, artificial note taker, do you ever like, hey, we need you to like take that off the Zoom?
Every time. It just, yeah, it kills me when we see that. And we always send out notices, this is not going to be recorded. We get a lot of pushback because members are like, I can't make the meeting. I want it recorded so I can see it later. And this is, an attorney-client, communication session. And no, we're not going to record it. We're not going to allow it. Now, are people using their phones in the background to record it? Who knows? But whenever we see it, it's absolutely not, because things can just get taken out of context, and it just creates all kinds of discovery problems in litigation, the other side being able to get their hands on it and things like that.
Yeah.
And we try to educate people, but they just think, well, what's easy for them, and without thinking about what's in the best interest of the group and the association. That's always the challenge.
I see that so often on this side too, where it's like, oh my gosh, and they're like, well, we'll just delete it, and you're like, this data doesn't necessarily get deleted even when you push, delete. Like, it's still metadata out there in the world, and in terms of communities that may be going through litigation, defect actions, is definitely like there are strategic important reasons why you don't necessarily want to have this metadata that's out there that you can just go and subpoena from, Meta or Google or any of those companies, because it still exists. And so, please, board members and homeowners and residents, like, turn your note takers off on the Zooms.
Other litigation considerations for me is, if we end up in court and it's an owner complaining about the board's actions, and it turns out the board relied on AI to write letters and it wasn't a personal response, it wasn't a thoughtful response, how is that going to play out in front of a jury? That, you can see the owner's attorney saying, oh, they don't even care about the owner. They're just using artificial intelligence to respond. They're heartless. They don't care. They just want to get it done fast and cheap. And, there's all kinds of, arguments that can be made to try to leverage that against a board. So in litigation, it's very concerning. There's a lot of angles you have to consider.
Yeah, I can see the potential where a response was given, but it didn't address the issue. And then it just kind of festered from there. It goes into a lawsuit. And I can see the potential where somehow the conversations goes, well, we responded. What are you talking about? We responded. You can't say we didn't deal with it. We responded. I can see the potential for that kind of an argument,
And we see it all the time with insurance companies. You get a canned response from an insurance company, and down the road, then it comes back to haunt, someone at the insurance company because they didn't really care about their customer or their client. So these are all considerations that I think are going to become issues as we move forward.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
Raylene, do you have any other questions that you want to ask for your audience?
I've only started using, I have Copilot because it's part of Microsoft, And we also have GPT, but it's just easier because I don't have to log in, But what I found in using Copilot is sometimes I'll put in something to rephrase because I'm not really the greatest in being articulate. So I'll use it as a tool to rephrase, to take out the tone, any but it sometimes it'll say, would you like me to rephrase it for use in a condominium? And I'm like, no, it doesn't relate to condominium, but it's taking the information I've used previously, right? The history of what I've used it for. So I was kind of like amazed that it's absorbing everything that I'm doing literally on my computer, you know.
That's wild.
Yeah, and majority of it is condo stuff, but I was just like, holy smokes, the potential for it to misunderstand or do something that I didn't want it to do. And I mistakenly relied on it too heavily and made my own mistake, So that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me, So now I'm always kind of put into rephrase, but then I step away. I take a break, I step away, get some water, come back, and then I'm looking at it again, So I always tell people, I go, you just can't do it quickly.
Yeah, I think that's like excellent advice.
Yeah, and understanding that AI trains on everything you provide to it and everything everyone else in the world provides to it. It's kind of was an eye opener for me when I first heard that. And then when one of our children advised me, well, there's a way you can, activate like ChatGPT to not train on whatever you're providing and not use it as part of its history. It keeps it a little bit more confidential. So, these are all the little tricks and things that you need to learn when you're using AI across all the different platforms because they're all a little different.
Yeah.
I really like using it to rephrase. So I'll put in a sentence or a paragraph and I'll ask it to rephrase. And it'll give me like 3 different versions, like casual, or more form or firm, and I read them and I don't use them verbatim. Sometimes I'll take portions, but it gets my own mind to think. I'll put my thoughts in writing because it does help with that creative part of the brain to get it moving, give it a kickstart.
I think that's like one of the best things to, really like figure out how you can have AI enhance you and really benefit your work product and, try to approach it from that way instead of like, oh, I'm just going to eliminate all of these things and all of these, time sucks and this and that. And you're like, but it could be looked at as an enhancement tool. And if it was strategically used like that, I think it could be of great benefit.
When we were in this conversation, in this recording, I was thinking back to remember when the telephones, your old-fashioned telephones, and then we had answering machines, right? And people thought that I was going to take jobs away from people, but you still have to write the answer, write the message on a piece of paper and give it to the person that belongs to, right? So it really didn't necessarily eliminate a job, but how far we've come, it's just, I'm just in awe that I'm unfortunately old enough to even think back that far.
I'm sure there are a group of audience listeners that are like, I don't understand what you mean, where you're like, the rotary dial.
Yeah.
The worst one in the world was the one. You had to go all the way around the dial.
Yeah. And it was such a cool thing when it turned a push button. But okay, thank you. Any closing remarks, Bill?
Just that AI is here to stay. And to me, it's all about education. And so we really welcome the opportunity to, today have Jasmine, who's studied this issue, presented on this issue in the past, be able to help educate, the listeners here in Hawaii on, this field that is just booming, and it's just going to become more and more prevalent. And hopefully that's the message that people can take away from this is it's here, learn how to use it, learn its, the pros and cons of it, and make sure you educate, those you work with and work around so that they have the same, knowledge base that's really critical to use AI.
And I think a big thing was what Jasmine said earlier, where Kim Kardashian, she used it to study for the bar and she failed. So it doesn't always enhance you to succeed. It can be detrimental to your own success, right? It's not
Absolutely.
a study tool. Okay. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate your time in educating us, our condo community, on the proper use of AI, the do's and don'ts. And like Bill said, it's here to stay. So we have to maneuver it carefully. And it doesn't replace your human brain, your human emotions. It doesn't replace that completely. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Raylene.
Oh, thank you, and have a good start to the holiday season that's quickly approaching us.
You too.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a good weekend.